Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine a massive, sprawling superpower, an empire that has literally dictated the laws, the trade, and the very culture of a vast subcontinent for centuries. Now imagine it cracking, splintering, and just totally collapsing under its own weight. This is the exact incredibly high-stakes scenario we're exploring in today's explainer. We're looking at the dramatic fall of the mighty ancient Indian Satavahana Empire, and more importantly, the totally audacious revolt of one man who watched it all happen and decided to seize the ultimate prize.
It presents the ultimate puzzle of history, doesn't it? When an empire falls, what are the actual tools required to build a new one from its ashes? If you're thinking it just takes armies, swords, and bloodshed, well, you're only seeing half the picture. To truly legitimize a brand new kingdom out of thin air, the secret weapons aren't actually weapons at all. As we're about to see, the real tools of state building in ancient India were horses, and believe it or not, ploughs.
Section 1. The Satavahana Empire collapses. Let's set the stage in the lower Krishna Valley. The Satavahanas were absolute titans of ancient India, but, even titans eventually face their twilight. We start seeing the classic rapid-fire symptoms of an empire in its death throes. First up, succession disputes. We've got royal family members viciously fighting over a shrinking pie. Second, a rapidly fading central authority. The capital's orders are suddenly acting a lot more like mere suggestions. And third, because of that vacuum, regional governors start acting completely autonomously. They're collecting their own taxes, raising their own local militias, and slowly forgetting who they actually work for. It's the absolute perfect recipe for a power vacuum, and into this chaotic vortex steps our main subject.
Moving on to Section 2, Chantamula seizes the throne. So, Vashishtiputra Chantamula I was absolutely not born a king. He was essentially a middle management guy, watching the empire crumble from the wings, just calculating his exact moment to strike. Before the collapse, he held the title of Mahatalavara, which basically translates to a local governor, a subordinate under the Satavahanas. But after, he declares himself a sovereign ruler. He didn't just casually take over a neighboring province, he opportunistically seized power to form an entirely new state, the Ikshvaku dynasty. The sheer audacity of this promotion is staggering. It's literally like a regional branch manager suddenly declaring his local office is now an independent, sovereign country. But obviously, claiming you're a king and actually getting people to believe it are two very different things.
Which brings us to Section 3, Vedic rituals as political PR.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he bridged the gap between seizing a throne and actually keeping it. Chantamula had a massive problem. He was an upstart. He needed legitimacy, and he needed it fast. His solution, the Aswamedha, the famous ancient horse sacrifice. We so often view these ancient rituals strictly through the lens of religion, but we really need to subvert that expectation right now. Chantamula revived his grand ancient rite as a highly calculated political declaration of absolute sovereignty. The ritual involves letting a consecrated horse roam freely for a year, and wherever it wanders, the king claims that land. If anyone stops the horse, boom, it means war. It was the ultimate, ancient, incredibly expensive billboard, loudly broadcasting to the entire world, I am untouchable and I am in charge.
But he definitely didn't stop there. He also performed the Agnishtoma and the Vajapeya. These were incredibly elaborate, highly complex Vedic rituals that required immense resources and the backing of powerful priests. By performing these, Chantamula was utilizing ancient traditions to loudly broadcast his supreme authority to both rivals and his new subjects. He was basically weaving his sudden opportunistic political rise into the very fabric of divine right. He made his newly seized power utterly undeniable and highly, highly legitimate.
So the crucial point is that we're looking at a brilliant two-pronged approach. On one hand, you have ideological control, using the Aswamedha and Vajapeya rituals to secure his public relations and his divine right to rule. But a state cannot survive on propaganda alone. True power requires an economic foundation. You can't just act like a king, you actually have to get paid like a king to fund your state.
That leads us into Section 4, the agrarian economic engine.
This brings us to the second half of Chantamula's genius state-building strategy, and it was entirely macroeconomic. Our sources detail a massive economic reform. Chantamula granted thousands of halas, which translates to ploughs, along with thousands of cattle, directly to Brahmins. Now, you might be wondering, why would a newly minted king just give away thousands of ploughs and cows? Well, think of it as an ancient economic stimulus package. He wasn't just giving away farming tools, he was distributing the exact capital required to build a kingdom's economy completely from the ground up.
And this brilliantly illustrates his strategy, which was a highly effective three-step process. Step 1. Grant the halas and the cattle to the priestly class, giving them a vested economic interest in your new kingdom. Step 2. Use those tools to clear the wild, uncultivated forests of the lower Krishna Valley. And Step 3. Create permanent, tax-yielding agricultural land. Chantamula literally transformed useless, wild terrain into a highly lucrative, sustainable tax base. He wasn't just conquering land, he was actively developing it to fund his new government.
Finally, Section 5, a stable new power center. By perfectly executing this dual strategy, Chantamula successfully anchored his new kingdom. He took the absolute chaos of the Satavahana collapse and replaced it with a highly structured, heavily funded, and religiously legitimized new state in the lower Krishna Valley. So, as we wrap up this explainer, really think about the mechanics of power we've just uncovered. Ultimately, what secures a new state more? The ideological power of propaganda or the economic engine of the plow? Chantamula knew you absolutely needed both to go from a middle management governor to an absolute king. It's just a fascinating look at the true tools of empire building. Keep that in mind the next time you hear about a kingdom rising from the ashes.